Hey bakers, Martin here in the studio today, and I'm making a bread which is a celebration of fall. It's pumpkin, sunflower, warm spices, and it's shaped and then cut into a decorative Epi de Ble form. This is a perfect loaf for the holiday table. Come along, let's make it. Action, ready, set, make bread. Okay, so this bread, like a lot of hearth breads that I make, begins with a preferment. And again, what is a preferment? A preferment is a piece of dough that is started the day before you actually do the mix. And the reason we do that, whether it's a liquid consistency or a stiff consistency, or if it's seeded with yeast or with sourdough culture, is for flavor. A little bit of function too, but mostly for flavor. We're basically building like a bouillon cube of fermentation flavor in the preferment. So this particular preferment is a liquid consistency. That means that it has almost equal parts by weight of flours and water. Now, for my flour choices here, throughout this recipe I'm using bread flour. Bread flour brings the strength. We have some inclusions in this dough, as you'll see. There are sunflower seeds, there's also some pumpkin. Those are things which in some ways weaken the dough, so a little bit of extra strength using bread flour. And then I'm also using some whole wheat. Today I went to the pantry, I grabbed our white whole wheat. I love that product, but I would also be happy to use our red wheat, which is also delicious. So I'm just gonna mix these directly in the container. And you don't need my lecture again about why I think that measuring by weight is better, but you know, put your container right on the scale. And this is one of those containers that I use almost every time that I bake. I put preferments in there. If it's a small batch, I'll put the dough in there. It comes with a lid. I love this 2-quart container. So bread flour in, and then I'm gonna add some of this white whole wheat. And the whole wheat flour is bringing some mineral content, right? It's bringing a lot of flavor. And so you'll see me go into that from time to time. It also brings a beautiful color. So I've got a little bit of whole wheat flour, and then a little bit of yeast, just a little bit. This is gonna sit overnight, 12 to 18 hours or so, so we just want a little bit of yeast, and then a nice long, slow fermentation. And some water. And this is a comfortable temperature, not super cold, not really hot. I think I'm around 95 degrees today. And then just stir to combine. And all I'm looking for here is a homogeneous consistency. So scrape the sides down, get it a little bit clean, and then we'll let this rest overnight. Pop that lid on, and we'll see you soon. Okay, so let's do this mix. I've got my preferment. It looks good. It smells good. It smells like the dough that I grew up with, my mother at the bench making bread. It's got that yeasty, delicious smell. It's all concentrated in the preferment. Let's get it into the bowl. Okay, so to the preferment, I'm going to add some water. Water is warmed just a little bit, about 95. I'll stir to combine, and then I'll add my pumpkin puree, just getting it homogeneous. And then I'll get all the other ingredients in there. Bread flour in the bowl, and like I said, we're using bread flour for a little bit of strength. We have some inclusions in this dough, and the bread flour is just going to make sure that we get a nice rise, and that when I load it into the oven, it gets a nice pop. Okay, also into the bowl, a little bit of cornmeal. This is for color and also for a little bit of crunch. I've got some black pepper. To me, pumpkin doesn't have a ton of flavor by itself. It's got that sort of vegetal base note, but I feel like we need a little bit of extra to sort of bring up the flavors. And you know, in a pumpkin bread, we use cinnamon and other aromatics to do that. But for something savory, I'm using pepper. I've also got some cumin, and it's about a teaspoon. Before it goes in, I want to make sure that I take it down just a little bit. So I'm just going to hit it with the mortar and pestle. Okay, a little bit of salt. Beep. A little bit of yeast, just a little bit. And some sunflower seeds. I toasted these a little bit in a pan on top of the stove, just to bring up the flavor. When I put seeds on the outside of a loaf, I don't pre-toast them. But if I put them on the inside, where heat has a harder time sort of getting in there and toasting things, I pre-toast them. So, and if you can buy them pre-toasted, that's fine, or roasted. And then just stir to combine. And it smells great. It smells peppery, and I can smell that cumin also. Just starting to combine. At some point along in here, I'll switch to a plastic scraper. It's like my right hand. And we'll get this homogeneous. Seriously though, like things that I use every time I bake. Scale, plastic scraper, hands, mouth, nose, eyes, heart. It's on my that's my holiday shopping guide for bakers. So this is like a medium firm consistency dough. It's definitely not soft. So if you have a little bit of like trepidation around dealing with sticky doughs, you know, this is a good dough for you. Plus it's beautiful. It bakes up really beautifully. This is kind of like a flex bread. People who, you know, want to take something, you know, it's going to a holiday party or something like that, and you want to have a loaf where people are like, oh, you made that? It's beautiful. Now, we're going to set that to rise for about 20 minutes. We're going to come back and knead it in the bowl. Don't forget to cover it. It's like shuffleboard. Okay, so the dough's had 20 minutes since we mixed, and it's ready for its first sort of development. And what I'm going to do is just simply knead it in the bowl. Now, you may have seen recipes which call for folding. This is a form of folding, but it's a little bit more aggressive. I'm adding a little bit more strength, and this is a great way to strengthen a dough. And all I'm going to do is just with a wet hand, I'm going to knead in the bowl. So, I'm pressing, I'm folding, and I'm turning. I'm pressing and folding, and I'm turning. And often I turn the bowl rather than picking up the massive dough each time. So it's a pretty quick process, and you'll see that what I end up with in this bowl is something which is quite a bit stronger than it was when I first started touching it. I can see that it's smoothed out. This dough is in a good condition, and now I'm going to cover it for another 20 minutes and then come back and sort of give it some more activity. I know that it fits. Just got to be patient. There we go. Okay. See you in 20. Bye. You ready? You ready? Let's go. Okay, so the dough's had about 90 minutes. I gave it the full length of bulk. If you go a little bit longer than that, that's okay. And let's see what we've got. This dough looks happy. And what I mean by that is that it's risen well. It's light. I often use the word marshmallowy. It feels air-filled, almost like pumped up. That means that the yeast are doing their job. The bread flour is doing its job. It's holding everything together. Beautiful dough, ready for divide. And I'm going to divide it into 2 equal pieces, about 340 or 350 each. 337. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a pre-shape. And a pre-shape is sort of like a stop on the way to your final destination. This is going to organize the dough into a form that will roll easily, because the final shape for this is going to look a lot like a baguette. And we can make it more beautiful, more even from end to end, so that it doesn't look like a snake that swallowed an egg or something like that. If we begin with a pre-shape, so let me show you what I mean. For this, I'm going to use what we call a tube pre-shape. In order to do that, I sort of pat the dough along its, what I would call, east-west axis. I'll bring the sides in just a little bit. I'll bring the sides in just a little bit, and then I'm going to roll it down. We call it a tubular pre-shape, because it's even from ends to end. So, pat gently to remove any large air bubbles along this east-west axis. I fold the sides in, pressing to adhere, and then I come from the top in 1, 2, 3 motions. And I set those aside to rest. And while they rest, make sure that you cover them. Because it's a relatively short period of time, it's okay to use a towel, that's fine. If I were going to leave them there for 45 minutes or an hour, I would want a more moisture-proof barrier, but because it's pretty quick, a towel is okay. All right, we'll be back. Get ready. So while our dough pieces rest, we're going to prepare the seed crust. And basically what I have here are some spices, salt, pepper, smoked paprika, cumin, and garlic powder, and then I have some sunflower seeds because we're going to add another layer of texture and flavor to the exterior of the loaf. Let me show you what we're going to do. I'm going to cut these sunflower seeds down just a little bit. So now let's mix the spice blend. I've got pepper, salt, cumin, smoked paprika, and a little bit of garlic powder. I really like this combination of spices. You know, we're into that season where you feel like you want some comforting things and some warming things, and this is a really nice blend. Lots of aromatic and a little bit of smoke from the paprika. And now let's prepare the seed tray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put about half of my sunflower seed mixture onto one side of a baking sheet. Just about half. Scrunch it over to one side. And this looks complicated, but I promise it's for a good reason. Your taste buds will thank you. And then about half of the spice blend. And the other part of making a seed tray is that you need something to moisten the exterior of the loaf, because what we're going to do is we're going to shape this dough into a form that looks like a baguette. We're going to roll it across this moist towel, and then we're going to put it onto the seeds so that everything adheres. This is a seed tray. We use them a lot in bakeries to make seeds and other things stick. So I've got a moist towel on the tray, and then I've got my dry seeds, and now we can shape. All right, so we're almost ready to shape. I've got my seed tray prepared. My tubular pre-shaped dough pieces are well relaxed and feeling like they're ready to be elongated and shaped. I have a piece of parchment, which I'm going to sprinkle with a little bit of cornmeal. And now we can get to the moment that we've all been waiting for, which is to shape these beautiful loaves. All right. The basic shaping process for this loaf is a baguette, but it's a little bit firmer dough. So those of you who haven't shaped baguettes before, or who, when I say we're going to shape baguettes now, feel a little bit like, I'm not sure about this. Trust me, it's going to be okay. Just watch what I do and follow along. Okay. So patting gently to remove any large air bubbles. And then I'm going to begin with the edge away from me, and I'm going to fold it about 2/3 of the way down. And I'm going to press to seal. Turn the dough around. I'm going to do it again, about 2/3 of the way down, and press to seal. And then I'll start at one end, and I'm just going to bring this edge that's away from me to the leading edge, and I'm going to press to seal. I like using the palm of my hand. You could also use your fingers. Working with your hands like a paddle, pressing to seal and adhere as you work your way down the dough piece. For some people, that might be more comfortable. What I'm trying to think about here is that I have a piece which is as tubular and almost pipe-like as possible, even end to end. That's why we did that tubular pre-shape, right? Okay. And now all I have to do is roll back and forth. That's why we call it rolling baguettes, right? It's really rolling. I roll back and forth. I feel the dough sort of yield to gentle pressure from my right hand, or left hand if you're left-handed. Once I have just a little bit of a scoop there, a little bit of what sometimes people call a dog bone, I go back and I make the whole dough piece that exact same height, and as I get to the end, I apply a little bit of downward pressure to achieve a little bit of taper. I have my piece of parchment here, which I know is the same size as my baking stone, and so that's a guide for me. It tells me how long I can make this little baguette piece. dough piece, whatever you want to call it. I have a clear seam, which is on the bottom of the loaf. And I can leave that. Beautiful. Looks happy. I'm going to set it aside for a second. I'm going to do it again. So now, it's time to apply the seed crust, right? It's time to apply the seed crust. I've got a top side and a bottom side to the loaf. Seam is on the bottom. I come over here and I place that top side, because that's where I want the seeds to go. I want to be able to see them, right? I want to be able to see them. And I roll it back and forth, and I look to see that I've got some moisture on the loaf. Yes, I do. It's looking good. It's feeling like it's going to stick pretty well. And then I bring it over here, and I place it on my seeds. And then I just sort of rock it back and forth a little bit, and you'll see that these seeds and spices are picked up by that moisture on the loaf. It looks good. Okay. We're going to let that one sit there for just a second. And remember that I split these spices and seeds in half roughly. I kind of eyeballed it. And the reason for that is that I want to make sure that I get good distribution on both halves or both loaves. So now these are going to get their final proof, right? And while they're rising, we want to make sure they're covered. So put a lid, put a pan, something like that on top. Make sure that they're not getting too much air as they rise. These are looking puffy. They look proofed, right? I mean, if you feel them, definitely proofed, which is nice. It means that we have a good active dough and it's strong. Bread flour is doing its work. We've given it good development and strength through that sort of kneading in the bowl. It's ready for the oven. Now we're ready to get the scissors and apply or create this decorative form we call Epi de Ble, right? And if you think about it, wheat on the stalk, it has that sort of like side to side look to it, and that's what we're going to emulate here with the scissors. And there's another video actually out there somewhere. Maybe Tucker will do something fancy and put a link up here or something, I don't know, to a video that I made with my son during the lockdown of how to make an Epi de Ble. With time and practice, cutting the Epi de Ble will become something that you don't even think about, but it does take some repetitions. And so maybe what I should do before I actually do it is just sort of pantomime what the action is. And there are a couple key things to consider. One is that it's a relatively low scissor blade angle, right? And so I don't want it to be at, directly up and down. And I don't even want it to be at like 90 degrees. That's still not enough. I want it to be down closer to like, a low angle. I don't know what that is, but it's a pretty low angle. And the reason for that is that it will give this sort of long, elongated segment to each piece that I cut. If it's too short, they end up stubby and it just doesn't look as much like wheat. It's not as beautiful. And so, nice low scissor angle, and then you don't want to cut through each segment, right? You want to cut almost all the way through, but not all the way through each segment. So, nice low blade angle, starting up here, and I'm going to cut them in, segments which are probably a couple inches in between. Okay. And as I cut, I lay one piece to the side, and then I come in, and I lay a piece to the side. I cut and lay a piece to the side, piece to the side, like that. And then you can come back in and see how you did. Looks beautiful. There we go. Man, it smells great. This is reminding me, and every time I make this bread, I have this memory, it like jogs this memory for me of going to Halloween carnivals at my elementary school way back in whatever year it was. It almost has this like toasted popcorn, buttery kind of smell to it. And then when you layer on top of that cumin, smoked paprika, the sunflower seeds and everything else, it's like this sort of fall harvest celebration. This is the perfect bread for this time of year where we focus more on gatherings and being with one another. It's a great sort of tear and share opportunity. I guarantee you that if you show up to a holiday table with one of these harvest pumpkin sunflower Epi de Ble, people's minds will be blown. And the bake is good, and one of the things I like about this bread additionally is that there is all this crust to crumb. So if you are a baguette person and you like those sort of crusty bits at the tip of each baguette, you only get 2 per loaf. Whereas with an epi, you get how many per loaf? A lot, right? So it's really like leaning into that crispy, crunchy, sort of dark tip flavor that you get with the baguette, but then made more incredible through pumpkin and seeds and spices and all of these things. And here's a tip. Look for the piece that has the most sort of the spice mixture on there. Like this one looks perfect to me. A little bit of cornmeal on the bottom, a little bit of cornmeal inside the dough, and also, you know, you can tell that it's got pumpkin in there. It's like got this beautiful yellow-orange hue to it. It's almost glowing. Dang. Really, really good. Salty, a little bit spicy from the black pepper. Smoky from the smoked paprika. It's tender, it's crispy. Bring this to the table, y'all. Thanks for joining us. Harvest pumpkin sunflower bread. Cheers.